Catherine Campbell, I don't remember what years, but long time ago. She's invite Shaposhnikova come and visit them in Switzerland.
In Switzerland,
Met.
Yeah.
And after this, it becomes some problem. So they don't want to see Shaposhnikova anymore.
Well, I was caught up in all of that, and I don't know what you know about Shaposhnikova or think about her, but another difficult person. So Catherine had the notion that because Sviatoslav had chosen Shaposhnikova to be the head of in charge of his things in Russia, which is not really quite true. He was persuaded to choose her, which is not the same thing. And that she was somehow like some anointed person, and she was all starry-eyed about it, and she invited Shaposhnikova to Switzerland a few times, but then she invited Shaposhnikova to her home here in Greenwich, Connecticut to visit. And I went to the airport with Ingeborg to wait for Shaposhnikova to come on the plane, and we took her in a limousine to Greenwich, Connecticut. And Catherine was all starry-eyed. I can't believe that you're here in my home, and all of that. And I left and came back here. It was evening, and they talked a long time, and finally Catherine and Ingi said that they were going to go to bed. There were 3 bedrooms, Catherine's and Ingi's, and another one that had all a kind of archive of materials. And they showed Shaposhnikova the archive of materials and told her she was welcome to look through everything. And they went to bed. In the morning, Catherine got up and she went into the living room, and Shaposhnikova was there, all dressed already. On the floor there was this mountain of material, and Shaposhnikova said, "I'm taking this to Moscow."
Why?
That's Shaposhnikova. So Catherine lost her temper and threw her out of the apartment. Said, "You can't stay here with me, I don't know." So they had a big fight. And Catherine called me on the phone and said, "I'm sending Shaposhnikova to you. You have to take care of her for 2 weeks because she'll be in America for 2 weeks."
Wow.
And so we did. We rented a room for her down the block here for 2 weeks, and she was here every day. And we took care of her, and we let her look through our archive, and we let her we fed her and took care of her. And
What is happening? Why Sviatoslav gave for Shaposhnikova this heritage, all this paper, archive to Russia? Do you know it? Did you met Sviatoslav?
Yeah. I met him first in 1984. Somewhere, I don't remember what year it was. And I was in Moscow at the time. It came out in the newspaper, and there was an open letter signed by Sviatoslav that was published in the newspaper, and it was called "Medlich nilzya," to delay is impossible. Gorbachev had promised Sviatoslav that he would support the establishing of a Roerich Study Center in Moscow. That was 1987 when he said that. And then Raisa Gorbacheva established the Roerich Fond Fond de Roerich, that was part of the Ministry of Culture, but separate. It was independent. And at some point, Shaposhnikova went to India and helped to prepare the transfer of all these hundreds of paintings and boxes and boxes and boxes of material and tons of things from India to come to Moscow as a donation to the Fond de Roerich. And she took everything he let her take and more besides. When he wasn't looking, she took things he didn't want her to have. And she even told me this, that Rajiv Gandhi was the head of the government in India, and he signed papers allowing all this material to go out of the country because there was a law that people who were designated as national treasures in India, none of their product could leave India. It belongs to the people of India. And that Roerich is one of them. So Rajiv Gandhi had to sign special papers exempting this, and he provided his own airplane, and they filled up the whole airplane with things. And Shaposhnikova said that Sviatoslav sent somebody to take a few things back that he did not give her permission to take, saying, "I'm not dead yet." And that's how it all came to Moscow. But it was a gift to the Fond de Roerich. And then somehow Shaposhnikova managed, through some boats or whatever, to pretend that her organization was the successor to the Fond de Roerich when Raisa Gorbachev had died. Yeah. So there was a little manipulation there, and a lot of people were very angry. But in that, to go back to the Medlit Nilzya, Sviatoslav wrote supposedly that there had been promised to be a center in Moscow, and it was time for there to be one, and that he chose Shaposhnikova to be the head of it. Shaposhnikova had sent, you could call it an accomplice, I suppose, who was a close friend of Sviatoslav, to India to persuade Sviatoslav to choose Shaposhnikova. Because when I spoke to Sviatoslav before that, and other people too, he always mentioned someone else who would be a woman who was a professor at MGU, the Moscow State University, and her name was Sazanova. And suddenly she was out of the picture, and there was Shaposhnikova. However that happened, she made trouble for herself all along because of her own character, I suppose. For example, she had an agreement with the city, Mayor Lushkov, who gave her the building for 50 years. He didn't give her the building, he lent her the building for 50 years. And she was supposed to pay some kind of token rent for it, really a small amount. And she said to me, "We're not going to pay that rent." And I said, well, why? And she said, "Well, churches don't pay rent." She said, "We shouldn't have to pay rent." And it was a principle to her. But then not too long ago, the city sent her a bill for that rent, back rent, that just devastated them, you know. And then her banker who supported her, Roerich, got into terrible trouble with the central bank. And that was partly her own, she knew what he was doing that caused him to get into trouble. Everybody knew, we used to talk about it here, that he laundered money for ex-KGB officials and all kinds of things, you know. So, you know, banker manipulations that finally got him into terrible trouble. So on their website they defend him as a great benefactor, you know, but in reality he was that too. He would do anything that she asked him to do. He spent millions on wasted things, trying to destroy other people. Just terrible, you know. There are all kinds of pressures, and now that they're in trouble and they have no money, I understand that some of the Roerich societies in the country, or around the country, that are under their umbrella, every payday the members give part of their salary that goes to Moscow to help. You know, it's a whole system.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know about it. I thought how they manage this. They have so much people.
I've often been amazed by things that happen there. I was in Switzerland once when Shaposhnikova visited Catherine, and we were both there having lunch in Catherine's apartment. And we are a small museum. We have 6 people all together, do everything, right? So in that context, Lyudmila said to me, I don't know what to do. I can't find dependable people. And she said, I just had to fire some people. And I said, how many did you fire? And she said, 50.
Wow. So big organization.
She fired 50 people
50
all at once.
Wow. How it's possible? I don't
She
know.
was under the influence of somebody then who was very strange. A woman who told Shaposhnikova a lot about previous incarnations and about all kinds of things like that that were mystical, and she could tell Lyudmila who was light and who was dark in the center there. And I think she told Lyudmila all these 50 people had to be, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of things were very strange.
But what
But
do
the
you think?
people who are there are dedicated. But they're also very combative. Last October there was an exhibit at the Museum of Oriental Art in Moscow, a big exhibit. It was mainly of the things that Catherine Stibbe had given to them, because she gave almost all her collection to them, because we're small and we have no room. So there was a round table discussion the second day, where admirably people were encouraged to stand up and speak about anything on their mind. So ICR sent somebody who stood up and declared to the entire room that all the paintings there were stolen and they should be returned to Lyudmila according to Sviatoslav's will.
Okay.
The room exploded with anger and It was terrible. Everybody was yelling and shaking fists, and it was terrible.
So have you been after in Russia again?
Mm-hmm.
Have you been a lot of time in Moscow?
About 15 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
All conference.
I started going to all the conferences, and I began going to, there would always be two conferences, one at Ludmila's and one at the Museum of Oriental Art.
Okay.
And they were enemies. So I would spend 2 hours here and then 2 hours there and then 2 hours there. But then, years later, when Shaposhnikova declared me to be an enemy, then it was simple. I couldn't go there anymore anyway. I remember being at a conference in Italy, a Roerich conference on Lake Garda. And all the people from Russia came, the influential Roerichites were there. And I was walking in Milan with Shaposhnikova, and she was beginning to feel her abilities to expand and control and create an umbrella, that she would be under which all other groups would come. And she told me about the only way the Roerich world could work would be a pyramidal association of all groups that would be under the direction and control of the top of the pyramid, which would be the Roerich Center in Moscow. She saw that as natural. And I told her that that would never work because the Western groups would not accept it. That in the West, the arrangement was not pyramidal, it was horizontal. All groups independent, not having any obligation to other groups to report to them, to submit to them, or anything, to follow their own best instincts. And I said to her, we don't even know many groups that exist because they don't tell us they exist. They don't ask our permission for anything. And I think that's wonderful. And she looked horrified. And she said, that's chaos. Right? You need order. So she had no sense of the blessing that freedom is. Freedom to make your own choices and make your own mistakes and learn from them and grow from them and not be monitored by somebody else.
Thank you.